The splash echoed like a gunshot through the pristine suburban silence. 12-year-old Marcus Wilson thrashed in 8 feet of chlorinated water, his Superman backpack dragging him down like an anchor. Above him, Patricia Holbrook, HOA president, pillar of the community, grandmother of 3, stood frozen at the pool's edge, her manicured hands still trembling from the violent shove. In 20 seconds, a child would nearly drown. In 20 minutes, a 911 call would shatter 2 families forever. And in 24 hours, the woman who'd spent 15 years policing lawn heights and mailbox colors would be sitting in an interrogation room, charged with attempted murder. This is the story of how a neighborhood dispute became a fight for justice, and how one pushed the first time Patricia Holbrook saw Marcus Wilson cut through her backyard. She was arranging white roses in her kitchen window. The 12-year-old moved with the easy confidence of summer vacation, his Superman backpack bouncing as he vaulted her perfectly manicured fence with the grace of youth. He landed softly on her immaculate St. Augustine grass, took 3 quick steps across her property line, and disappeared into the Hendersons' yard next door. Patricia's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. In 15 years as Willowbrook Estates HOA president, she'd never seen such blatant disregard for property boundaries. Not from the college kids who sometimes visited the Jamesons. Not even from the delivery drivers who occasionally parked crooked. But this child had just treated her prize-winning lawn like a public thoroughfare. She set down her cup with a sharp clink and reached for her leather-bound HOA violation notebook. The pages were filled with meticulous documentation. Garbage cans left out past pickup, Christmas lights up too late, fence heights exceeding regulation. But this was different. This was personal. Gerald, she called to her husband, who was reading the financial section in his recliner. Did you see that? The boy from the Wilson house just cut straight through our yard. Gerald Holbrook barely looked up from his newspaper. Kids take shortcuts, Paddy. Always have. Not through our yard, they don't. She was already reaching for her phone, scrolling through her contacts for the Wilson family number. New residents moved in 3 months ago to the corner house. With the slightly overgrown hedge that she'd already flagged twice for violation notices. The phone rang 4 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello. This is Patricia Holbrook, HOA president. I'm calling about your son. A pause. Is Marcus okay? What happened? Your son just trespassed through my backyard. This is a violation of community property standards and I won't tolerate. Wait, what? He cut through your yard. The woman's voice carried the exhaustion of a single mother working double shifts. Mrs. Holbrook, I'll talk to him, but kids take shortcuts. It's not exactly a federal crime. Patricia's grip tightened on the phone. In Willowbrook Estates, we maintain certain standards. Property boundaries exist for a reason. Your son needs to use the sidewalks like everyone else. I understand, and I'll talk to Marcus. But with all due respect, Mrs. Holbrook, you've sent us 4 violation notices in 3 months. Our hedge, our mailbox placement, our garbage can positioning. We are trying our best here. The rules apply to everyone equally, Patricia said. Her voice rising. No exceptions. Of course not. The line went quiet for a moment. I'll handle it. Have a good day, Mrs. Holbrook. The phone clicked dead, leaving Patricia staring at her reflection in the kitchen window. Equal application of rules, that's all she'd ever done. She'd built Willowbrook Estates into the most desirable neighborhood in the county through consistent enforcement. Property values had increased 30% under her leadership. Crime was non-existent. Every lawn was pristine, every mailbox regulation compliant. So why did she feel like the villain? 3 days later, Marcus Wilson cut through her yard again. This time, Patricia was ready. She'd been watching from her bedroom window, had seen him walking home from the community pool with his backpack slung over one shoulder, swim goggles dangling from his wrist. He approached her fence with the same casual confidence, placed one hand on the picket, and prepared to vault. Patricia was out her back door before his feet hit the ground. Stop right there. Marcus froze, 1 foot still on the fence rail, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Up close, she could see he was smaller than she'd remembered. Thin arms, knobby knees, eyes that seemed too old for his 12-year-old face. I spoke to your mother 3 days ago about this exact behavior. You are not permitted to cross through private property. Use the sidewalk. Marcus dropped to the ground, his wet swim trunks leaving damp prints on her pristine concrete patio. I'm sorry, Mrs. Holbrook. HOA president. She pulled out her phone and snapped a photo of him standing on her patio. This is your second documented violation. One more and I'll be filing a formal complaint with the county. A complaint? Marcus's voice cracked slightly. For walking through your yard. For trespassing. For property damage to my grass. For willful violation of community standards. Each word came out clipped and precise. Your mother assured me this wouldn't happen again. My mom works 2 jobs, Marcus said quietly. She's not even home yet. I was just trying to get home faster too, that's not my concern. Community rules exist for everyone's benefit. No shortcuts through private property. Period. Marcus nodded quickly, shouldering his backpack. Okay. I'm sorry. I'll go around. He turned and walked back toward the street, his flip-flops slapping against the pavement. Patricia watched him go, noting how his shoulders hunched forward, how he kept looking back at her house like she might follow him. Good. Maybe now he'd learned his lesson. But as she turned to go back inside, something nagged at her. The way he'd said his mother worked 2 jobs. The exhaustion in his voice. The careful politeness even when she'd threatened him. She shook off the feeling. Rules were rules. Exceptions led to chaos. The next morning, Patricia found a handwritten note taped to her front door. Mrs. Holbrook, I'm really sorry about Marcus cutting through your yard. I've talked to him several times and I thought we had it handled. I work early shifts at the hospital and late shifts at the diner, so sometimes supervision gets tricky. I promise it won't happen again. Also, I wanted to thank you for keeping our neighborhood so beautiful. Marcus and I moved here because we wanted somewhere safe and well-maintained for him to grow up. I know the HOA violations seem constant. But we are learning the rules and trying to catch up. Please be patient with us. Sincerely, Keisha Wilson. Patricia read the note twice, then crumpled it up and threw it in her kitchen trash. Sob stories and excuses, she'd heard them all before. The Hendersons had tried the same approach when she'd cited them for their dying oak tree. The Patels had written a similar letter about their fence height violation. But the rules had transformed. Willowbrook Estates. When she'd moved here 20 years ago, it had been a modest subdivision with patchy lawns and mismatched mailboxes. Under her leadership, it had become a showcase. Magazine-worthy. A place where property values soared and families felt safe. A place with standards. 2 weeks passed without incident. Patricia began to relax, assuming the Wilson boy had finally learned to respect property boundaries. Her roses were blooming magnificently, she was considering entering them in the county fair. Gerald had praised her pot roast Sunday night. The quarterly HOA meeting had gone smoothly, with only minor violations to address. Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Patricia was in her backyard, deadheading roses near the pool area, when she heard voices from the Henderson property next door. Their teenage daughter Emma was having friends over, something Patricia had flagged as a potential noise violation but hadn't yet documented. The sounds of teenage laughter and splashing carried over the fence, along with the smell of barbecue smoke that was probably violating the outdoor cooking regulations. She was making mental notes about pool party noise ordinances when she saw movement in her peripheral vision. Marcus Wilson was cutting through her yard again. But this time was different. He wasn't alone. 3 other kids followed behind him, too. Boys and a girl, all around his age, all carrying pool gear and laughing. They moved as a pack across her perfect lawn, leaving footprints in the soft earth around her prize rose bushes. Patricia saw red. She dropped her gardening shears and marched toward them, her voice carrying across the yard like a whip crack. Stop. All of you, stop right there. The group froze. Marcus stepped protectively in front of the other kids, his face going pale as he recognized her. Mrs. Holbrook, I'm sorry, we were just trespassing. Again. With accomplices this time. She was breathing hard, 15 years of neighborhood enforcement boiling over into pure rage. I have spoken to you twice. I have spoken to your mother. I have documented every violation. And now you bring friends to stomp through my property. Like it's a public park. We weren't stomping, one of the other boys said. We were just cutting through to get to, I don't care where you were going. Patricia's voice reached a pitch that made several birds take flight from her oak tree. This is private property. These are prize-winning roses. This lawn has won the Neighborhood Beauty Award 3 years running. Marcus stepped forward, his hand. Time fractured into horror movie frames. Marcus surfaced again, his mouth opening in a silent scream before water rushed in. His Superman backpack had twisted around his torso like a straitjacket, the heavy books inside dragging him down with merciless physics. 8 feet of water might as well have been the Mariana Trench to a drowning 12-year-old. Patricia stood paralyzed at the pool's edge, her brain short-circuiting between disbelief and terror. This wasn't supposed to happen. She'd meant to teach him a lesson, not this. The boy's desperate thrashing sent waves lapping against the pool's decorative tile border, tile sheet special ordered from Italy 3 years ago. Help him. The scream came from Emma Henderson, who had vaulted the fence with surprising agility. The 16-year-old didn't hesitate, she dove into the pool fully clothed, her summer dress billowing around her as she kicked toward Marcus. The shock of Emma's action broke Patricia's paralysis. She fumbled for her phone, her manicured fingers slipping on the screen. 911, there's been an accident, what's your emergency? A child fell in my pool. He's drowning. He can't, Patricia's voice cracked as she watched Emma reach Marcus just as he went under again. The teenager grabbed for him, but the waterlogged backpack made him dead weight. Address? 1247, Willowbrook Lane. Please hurry. He's just a boy. Emma surfaced, gasping, her arms wrapped around Marcus's limp form. She was strong from 4 years of varsity swim team, but even she struggled with his dead weight. I can't, the backpack, it's too heavy. More kids were arriving, drawn by the screaming. They lined the fence like a jury, their young faces pale with shock. Patricia realized dimly that several of them had phones out, recording everything. In the age of social media, her moment of rage was being preserved in high definition. Get the straps. Emma shouted, treading water desperately. Someone help me get this thing off him. But Patricia couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't process that the perfectly controlled world she'd spent 15 years building was collapsing in real time. Her prize roses looked on like silent witnesses to her destruction. A splash behind Emma announced a second rescuer, Jake Morrison. From 3 houses down, a college sophomore home for summer break. He was a strong swimmer, and between him and Emma, they managed to wrestle the backpack off Marcus's unconscious form. The Superman logo disappeared beneath the surface like a fallen hero. Is he breathing? Jake yelled as they pulled Marcus toward the shallow end. Emma pressed her ear to his chest. I can't tell. Just get him out. Patricia finally moved, extending her pool skimmer toward the kids in the water. But her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. Behind her, she heard car doors slamming, neighbors emerging from their perfect houses to witness her perfect life imploding. Patricia. Gerald's voice, sharp with confusion and fear. What the hell happened? She couldn't answer. Couldn't explain how 15 years of meticulous rule enforcement had led to this moment. How her need for neighborhood perfection had nearly killed a child. Jake and Emma hauled Marcus onto the pool deck. The boy's lips were blue, his Superman t-shirt clinging to his thin chest. Emma immediately started CPR, apparently she'd been a lifeguard the previous summer. Come on, she whispered between compressions. Come on, Marcus. Don't you dare die on me. The words hit Patricia like physical blows. Don't you dare die. Because if Marcus Wilson died in her backyard, she wouldn't just be the HOA president who enforced hedge height regulations. She'd be a murderer. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Patricia found herself fixated on absurd details, the way the pool water had splashed onto her Italian tiles, the fact that Emma's CPR was dripping chlorinated water onto her recently power-washed deck, the small crowd of neighbors gathering behind the fence line like spectators at an execution. Move back, everyone. The paramedic's voice cut through Patricia's mental fog. 2 EMTs burst through her gate, equipment in hand, professionalism radiating from every movement. Emma reluctantly stepped aside as they took over. He was under for maybe 2 minutes, she reported, her voice clinical despite her obvious terror. We got the backpack off and pulled him out. I've been doing CPR for about 3 minutes. Good work, the lead paramedic said, checking Marcus's pulse. Kid, can you hear me? Marcus's eyes flooded. He coughed, water streaming from his mouth, and Patricia felt something inside her chest unclench slightly. He was alive. Traumatized, potentially damaged, but alive. Easy, son. You're okay. You're going to be fine. The paramedic's voice was gentle as he fitted an oxygen mask over Marcus's face. What's your name? Marcus, the boy whispered. His voice barely audible through the mask. Marcus, I'm Steve. You took a pretty nasty swim there, but you're safe now. We are going to take you to the hospital, make sure everything's working right. Can you tell me how old you are? 12. Patricia watched the exchange with growing horror. Not horror at Marcus's condition, though that was terrifying enough, but horror at what would come next. Police cars were pulling up outside. More neighbors were gathering. And somewhere across town, Keisha Wilson was probably finishing her shift at the diner, completely unaware that her son had nearly died in a neighbor's pool. A police officer appeared at Patricia's elbow. Officer Rodriguez, according to his name tag, young, professional, with kind eyes that were currently studying her with uncomfortable intensity. Are you the homeowner? Yes. Patricia Holbrook. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears. Can you tell me what happened here? The question hung in the air like a sword. Patricia looked around her backyard, her perfect, pristine, award-winning backyard where a child had nearly drowned because of her actions. The paramedics were loading Marcus onto a stretcher, his small form dwarfed by the equipment. Emma Henderson sat on Patricia's decorative bench, soaking wet and shaking, her summer dress ruined from the rescue. And all around them, neighbors whispered and pointed and held up phones, documenting the end of Patricia Holbrook's reign as the Queen of Willowbrook Estates. It was an accident, Patricia said finally. Officer Rodriguez wrote something in his notebook. What kind of accident? Before Patricia could answer, a voice cut through the crowd noise like a blade. That's a lie. Everyone turned. Jake Morrison stood dripping by the pool, his jaw set in angry determination. The college sophomore who'd helped rescue Marcus was staring at Patricia with naked disgust. It wasn't an accident, Jake continued, his voice carrying clearly to every neighbor, every phone camera, every recording device in the vicinity. I saw what happened from my bedroom window. She pushed him. Patricia's world tilted sideways. That's not, I didn't mean, she grabbed his shoulder and shoved him toward the pool, Jake pressed on, relentless. The kid was trying to get away from her and she pushed him in. On purpose. Officer Rodriguez looked up from his notebook. Is this true? The question echoed in Patricia's head as paramedics wheeled Marcus toward the ambulance. The boy's eyes found hers as they passed and she saw something in his expression that cut deeper than any violation notice she'd ever written. Fear. Not just of drowning, but of her. Of what she was capable of when her perfect world was threatened. Mrs. Holbrook. Officer Rodriguez repeated. Did you push the child into the pool? Patricia opened her mouth to deny it, to explain about property violations and trespassing and 15 years of maintaining community standards. But the words died in her throat as more voices joined the chorus. I saw it too, called Mrs. Peterson from 2 houses down. From my kitchen window. She was screaming at those kids, added Mr. Chen. completely lost it over them walking through her yard. She's been harassing the Wilson family since they moved in, Emma Henderson said, her voice shaking with anger and adrenaline. Constant violation notices, complaints about everything. She's been targeting them. Patricia looked around at her neighbors, people whose lawns she'd helped perfect, whose property values she'd protected, whose community she'd devoted 15 years to improving. And in every face, she saw the same thing: disgust, disappointment, and dawning realization that their beloved HOA president was capable of attempted murder. Officer Rodriguez said again, his voice gentler now but no less insistent. I need you to answer the question. Did you physically push Marcus Wilson into your pool? The ambulance doors slammed shut with Marcus inside, the sound reverberating through Patricia's chest like a gunshot. Red and blue lights painted her perfect roses in garish colors as the vehicle pulled away, carrying a 12-year-old boy whose only crime had been taking a shortcut through her yard. Patricia Holbrook looked at the police officer, at her soaking wet pool deck, at the growing crowd of neighbors who would never look at her the same way again. She thought about hedge height violations and mailbox regulations and property line enforcement. She thought about 15 years of building the perfect neighborhood through rigid adherence to rules and standards. And she realized that in her quest for perfection, she had become the very thing she'd tried so hard to keep out of Willowbrook Estates. A threat to the community. Yes, she whispered, the word tearing from her throat like barbed wire. Yes. I pushed him. Officer Rodriguez nodded grimly and reached for his handcuffs. Behind him, phones continued recording as Patricia Hull. The Willowbrook County Jail was nothing like the pristine world Patricia had spent 15 years perfecting. Concrete walls stained with decades of desperation. Fluorescent lights that buzzed with electrical uncertainty. The smell of industrial disinfectant barely masking something darker, more human. Patricia sat on a metal bench in the holding cell, still wearing her gardening clothes from 3 hours ago. Rose thorns had left tiny scratches on her forearms, wounds that seemed absurd now, considering she'd nearly killed a child over flour beds. Holbrook. The guard's voice echoed off the walls. Your lawyer's here. David Brennan looked every inch the expensive attorney Patricia's emergency retainer had secured. Armani suit, leather briefcase, the kind of confident bearing that came from winning cases others deemed unwinnable. He sat across from her in the consultation room, his expression professionally neutral. Tell me everything, he said, opening his legal pad. From the beginning. Patricia recounted the events, the repeated trespassing, the property damage, the escalating confrontations. With each detail, she watched Brennan's expression shift from neutral to concerned to something approaching horror. You confessed, he said when she finished. In front of multiple witnesses. On camera. I was in shock. That boy nearly, Patricia's voice cracked. Is he okay? The hospital won't tell me anything. Marcus Wilson is stable. Mild hypothermia, some water in his lungs, but he'll recover physically. Brennan leaned back in his chair. Patricia, you need to understand what you're facing. Attempted murder in the 2nd degree. Assault on a minor. Reckless endangerment. Child endangerment. We are looking at 15 to 25 years. The numbers hit her like physical blows. 25 years. She'd be 78 when she got out. Gerald would be gone. Her grandchildren would be adults. The perfect life she'd built would be nothing but a memory. It was an accident, she said. Weakly. I didn't mean for him to almost drown. You intentionally pushed a child into 8 feet of water. That's attempted murder, not an accident. Brennan's voice was clinical. The prosecution is going to argue premeditation based on your documented harassment of the Wilson family. 4. Violation notices in 3 months. Confrontational phone calls. A pattern of escalating behavior targeting a black family in a predominantly white neighborhood. Patricia's stomach dropped. This isn't about race. It's about property standards. Try explaining that to a jury when they see the violation records. Brennan pulled out his phone, scrolling through what looked like social media posts. The story's already gone viral. HOA Karen tries to drown black child has been shared 50,000 times in the last hour. There's security footage from the Henderson's doorbell camera showing the entire incident. He turned the phone toward her. Patricia watched herself grab Marcus's shoulder, watched her own face contort with rage, watched herself shove a 12-year-old boy toward the pool with enough force to send him tumbling backward into the water. On the small screen, she looked exactly like what she was, a middle-aged white woman attacking a black child. "Dear God," she whispered. "It gets worse." Brennan swiped to another video. Emma Henderson live-streamed the rescue attempt. 200,000 views and climbing. The comments are not favorable. Patricia didn't want to know, but she had to ask. What are they saying? That you're a racist. That this was a hate crime. That you should be charged with attempted murder in the first degree. Brennan put his phone away. There's a protest forming outside your house. News crews from 3 counties are setting up. This is going to be national news by tomorrow morning. Through the consultation room's small window, Patricia could see the jail's parking lot filling with media vans. Satellite dishes extended like accusing fingers toward the sky. Her perfect neighborhood was about to become the center of a national conversation about race, privilege, and justice. What about bail? She asked. Judge set it at $500,000. Given the media attention and flight risk assessment, you're probably looking at house arrest with electronic monitoring if you can make bail. House arrest. In the same house where she'd nearly killed Marcus Wilson. Where protesters were probably already gathering. Where every neighbor who'd once respected her now saw her as a monster. I need to call Gerald, she said. But when the guard brought her to the phone bank, Patricia discovered that Gerald had already called. The conversation lasted exactly 3 minutes and 17 seconds. She watched the timer on the wall clock, focusing on anything except her husband's words. The mortgage company called. Media attention affecting property values. The neighbors are asking questions. Mrs. Henderson won't even look at me. I've moved to the guest bedroom. Need time to think. Patricia, what have you done? When she hung up, Patricia realized she was completely alone. No husband sleeping beside her. No neighbors bringing casseroles when she was sick. No community that looked to her for leadership. She had systematically destroyed every relationship that mattered while trying to protect a neighborhood that no longer wanted her. Her lawyer's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then showed her the screen. The prosecutor wants to meet tomorrow. Sandra Martinez, she's ambitious, media savvy, and has a 93% conviction rate. This case is going to make her career. Patricia stared at the name. She knew Sandra Martinez by reputation, the young Latina prosecutor who'd put away 3 corrupt city council members the previous year. A woman who'd built her career fighting for justice against powerful people who thought rules didn't apply to them. People exactly like Patricia Holbrook. There's something else, Brennan said carefully. The Wilson family's attorney called. They are considering a civil suit for emotional distress, medical expenses, and pain and suffering. Given the video evidence and media attention, they are in a strong position to win substantial damages. How substantial? Everything you own. Patricia closed her eyes and saw Marcus Wilson's face as the paramedics wheeled him away. The fear in his 12-year-old eyes. The way he tried to protect his friends even when she was screaming at him. The quiet dignity in his voice when he'd offered to pay for garden damage with his birthday money. She'd nearly killed a child whose only offense was being kind. There's one more thing, Brennan said. Channel 7 wants an exclusive interview. Your side of the story might help with public opinion before trial. Patricia imagined sitting across from a news anchor, trying to explain how prize roses and property lines had led to attempted murder. Trying to justify 15 years of violation notices and boundary enforcement while a 12-year-old recovered from a drowning. No, she said quietly. Patricia, media strategy is crucial in high-profile cases. If we control the narrative, I said no. She looked at her reflection in the consultation room's metal table. I pushed a child into a pool because he walked through my yard. There's no narrative that makes that acceptable. Brennan studied her for a long moment. Are you having second thoughts about your plea? Patricia thought about Marcus Wilson thrashing in 8 feet of water. About Emma Henderson diving in to save him. About Jake Morrison's brave testimony. About neighbors who'd watched her transform from community leader to attempted murderer. In the span of a single afternoon. I'm having first thoughts, she said. For the first time in years, I'm actually thinking about what I've done instead of justifying it. Her lawyer's phone buzzed again. This time, his expression shifted to something between surprise and concern. The district attorney's office just released a statement. They are upgrading the charges. To what? Attempted murder in the first degree. With hate crime enhancements. Brennan's voice was grim. Patricia, they are going for life without parole. Outside the consultation room, Patricia could hear the jail filling with evening bookings. Drunks and petty criminals and people whose worst day was still better than hers. She thought about her immaculate house, her prize-winning garden, her 15 years of perfect HOA leadership. All of it meaningless now. All of it destroyed by 30 seconds of rage over a property line. There's something I need to tell you, she said quietly. Brennan looked up from his notes. What? This isn't the first time. What do you mean? Patricia took a shaky breath. Marcus Wilson wasn't the first black family I've targeted. The Johnsons 3 years ago, I made their lives hell over a fence dispute until they moved. The Roberts before that, 27. Violation notices in 6 months. I told myself it was about standards, but... She trailed off, finally seeing the pattern she'd spent years denying. Brennan stared at her. You're telling me this was racially motivated? I'm telling you I need to stop lying to myself. Patricia's voice was barely a whisper. I nearly killed a 12-year-old boy because I couldn't stand that a black family wasn't afraid of me. Her lawyer closed his notebook. Patricia, I can't represent you if you're going to confess to hate crimes. Then don't represent me. She stood up, her gardening clothes wrinkled and stained with pool water and shame. I'm tired of having lawyers and rules and perfect neighborhoods protect me from the consequences of my actions. Through the consultation room window, she could see news vans multiplying in the parking lot like cancer cells. By tomorrow, her story would be everywhere. HOA president tries to drown black child. The perfect neighborhood. 6 months later, courtroom 3B of the Willowbrook County Superior Court buzzed with tension that felt electric. Every seat was filled, reporters, community activists, neighbors from Willowbrook estates, and families who'd driven hours to witness what had become the most watched hate crime trial in the county's history. Patricia sat at the defendant's table in an orange jumpsuit, her hands folded in her lap. The woman who'd once commanded HOA meetings with military precision now looked diminished, older, like a plant that had been uprooted from perfect soil and left to wither. Her court-appointed attorney, a tired-looking public defender named James Walsh, shuffled through papers with the resignation of a man fighting an unwinnable case. Patricia had fired 3 lawyers in the past 6 months. Each had tried to craft a defense strategy, temporary insanity, emotional distress, even claiming the push was accidental. She'd rejected them all. No plea bargains. No excuses. She would face trial for attempted murder with hate crime enhancements, and she would tell the truth. Even if the truth destroyed what remained of her life. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Maria Santos presiding. Judge Santos was a formidable woman in her 50s, known for her fairness and intolerance for courtroom theatrics. She'd handled several high-profile cases, but nothing quite like this, an attempted murder case that had sparked national conversations about systemic racism, neighborhood harassment, and the weaponization of homeowners associations. Be seated, Judge Santos said, her voice carrying easily through the packed courtroom. We are here for the trial of Patricia Marie Holbrook, charged with attempted murder in the first degree with hate crime enhancements, assault on a minor, reckless endangerment, and child endangerment. Prosecution, your opening statement. District Attorney Sandra Martinez stood with the confidence of someone who knew she held every advantage. Young, sharp, and media savvy, she'd built her reputation. prosecuting cases where powerful people hurt vulnerable victims. This trial was her masterpiece. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Martinez began, her voice carrying clearly to the back of the courtroom. 6 months ago, Patricia Holbrook pushed a 12-year-old boy into 8 feet of water because he walked through her yard. Not because he damaged anything. Not because he threatened anyone. Because he took a shortcut through her perfect neighborhood. She gestured toward the evidence table where Marcus's waterlogged Superman backpack sat in a clear evidence bag. The sight of it made several jurors shift uncomfortably. "You will hear testimony that Mrs. Holbrook systematically harassed the Wilson family from the day they moved to Willowbrook Estates. 4 violation notices in 3 months. Confrontational phone calls. A pattern of escalating behavior that culminated in the attempted murder of Marcus Wilson." Martinez paused, letting the weight of those words settle over the jury. "You will see security footage of Mrs. Holbrook grabbing Marcus, shoving him toward her pool with enough force to send him tumbling into the water. You will hear testimony from witnesses who watched this 12-year-old boy nearly drown while the defendant stood watching." The prosecutor's voice rose slightly. "And you will learn that this was not an isolated incident. Mrs. Holbrook has a documented history of targeting black families in her neighborhood. The prosecution will prove that this was not just attempted murder, it was a hate crime, motivated by racial animus and enabled by 15 years of unchecked power." Martinez returned to her table, the courtroom silent except for the scratch of reporters' pens. She had laid out the case with surgical precision. Patricia Holbrook was a racist who tried to kill a child. "Defense, your opening statement," Judge Santos said. James Welsh stood slowly, glancing at Patricia with the expression of a man about to perform surgery with a butter knife. She'd insisted on telling the truth, which left him with very little to work with. "Ladies and gentlemen," Welsh began, his voice lacking the prosecutor's confidence. "What happened in Patricia Holbrook's backyard was tragic. Inexcusable. A moment of rage that nearly cost a young boy his life." He paused, seeming to gather himself. "But it was not premeditated murder. It was not a hate crime. It was the culmination of a neighborhood dispute that spiraled tragically out of control." Walsh gestured toward Patricia, who sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on her folded hands. "You will hear that Mrs. Holbrook called 911 immediately after the incident. That she cooperated fully with police. That she has no prior criminal record and spent 15 years dedicated to her community." The defense attorney's words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "The defense asks only that you consider all the evidence and that you distinguish between a terrible mistake and premeditated attempted murder." He sat down, and Patricia could feel the jury's skeptical stares. In a courtroom packed with people who'd seen the viral videos, who'd read the social media posts, who'd watched her become a symbol of suburban racism, Walsh's words carried about as much weight as tissue paper. "Prosecution, call your first witness," Judge Santos said. The state calls Marcus Wilson. A hush fell over the courtroom as Marcus entered. He was taller than he'd been 6 months ago, but still clearly a child, thin shoulders, nervous energy, eyes that seemed older than his 13 years. He wore a button-down shirt and khakis, his hair freshly cut, looking like any kid dressed up for a school presentation. Patricia watched him walk to the witness stand and felt something break inside her chest. This was the boy she'd nearly killed. This was the child whose only crime had been taking a shortcut through her yard. "Marcus," Martinez said gently, "I know this is difficult. Take your time and just tell us what happened on the afternoon of January 15th. Marcus's voice was quiet but clear. "I was walking home from the community pool with some friends. We were cutting through Mrs. Holbrook's yard because it was faster, and I thought it would be okay since we weren't hurting anything." "Had you cut through Mrs. Holbrook's yard before?" "Yes, a few times. My mom told me not to after Mrs. Holbrook called to complain, but I forgot that day." Patricia closed her eyes. A child who forgot. That's what had triggered her rage, a 13-year-old who forgot. "What happened when Mrs. Holbrook saw you?" Marcus's voice got smaller. "She started yelling. Really loud. She was angry about her roses and her lawn. She said we were destroying her property. What did you do? I tried to apologize. I told her I would pay for any damage with my birthday money. I tried to get my friends over the fence so they wouldn't get in trouble. Martinez nodded encouragingly. Then what happened? She grabbed my shoulder really hard. She was saying things about how I didn't respect rules, how my mom didn't teach me right. Marcus's voice cracked slightly. Then she pushed me. Can you describe the push? It was hard. Like she really meant it. I tried to catch myself, but I had my backpack on and it was heavy from pool stuff and my books. I fell backward into the water. The courtroom was silent except for the soft sound of someone crying in the gallery. Martinez continued, did you know how to swim? A little. But not with a heavy backpack in deep water. I kept going under. I thought. He trailed off, his young voice barely audible. I thought I was going to die. Patricia felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She'd done this. She'd put that fear in a child's voice. No further questions, Martinez said. Walsh's cross-examination was brief and respectful. He established that Marcus had been warned about trespassing, that he'd cut through the yard multiple times despite being told not to. But nothing he said could change the fundamental truth: Patricia had pushed a child into deep water and nearly killed him. The prosecution's case unfolded like a methodical destruction. Emma Henderson testified about the rescue, her voice shaking as she described pulling Marcus's limp body from the pool. Jake Morrison recounted watching the attack from his bedroom window. Officer Rodriguez read Patricia's confession into the record. Then came the evidence that transformed the case from assault to hate crime. The state calls Denise Johnson. Patricia's heart sank as Denise Johnson took the stand. The elegant black woman in her 40s had lived in Willowbrook Estates 3 years ago, before Patricia's harassment campaign had driven her family away. Mrs. Johnson, Martinez began, how many HOA violations did you receive during your time in Willowbrook Estates? 47 in 18 months. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. 47 violations was unprecedented. Most residents might receive 1 or 2 per year for minor infractions. Can you describe the nature of these violations? Johnson's voice was steady, professional. Everything you could imagine. Our fence was allegedly 6 inches too high, though it was identical to our neighbors. Our mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Our oak tree dropped leaves on the common area. Our teenage son's music was too loud during permitted hours. Did other residents receive similar violations for identical issues? No. Our next-door neighbors had the exact same fence height and mailbox color. They received 0 violations. Martinez pulled out a thick folder. I'm showing you Prosecution Exhibit 47, a photograph of your fence next to your neighbor's fence. Can you tell the jury what you observe? They are identical. Same height, same materials, same everything. But only we were cited for violations. The prosecutor continued methodically through